I still remember the day the envelope arrived. Thick, crisp, and official looking, it slid through the mail slot with a thud that seemed louder than it should have been. Louder in my chest than in the hallway. Divorce papers. After 23 years of marriage, my husband, my ex-husband-to-be, had reduced me to a stack of forms, cold paragraphs, and blank spaces waiting for my trembling signature. At first, I thought I knew what to expect. A fight over the house. A split of the bank accounts. Some wrangling about retirement funds. Painful, yes, but predictable. What I did not know, what I could not have known, was how much of our life together had been a performance. How many secrets had been tucked neatly behind that smug smile he wore. And how those divorce papers were not an ending, but the first clue. Because buried in those documents was a lie. And lies, once uncovered, are never content to stay quiet. The night before the papers arrived, my husband, Mark, had walked into the kitchen wearing a smile that did not belong on the face of a man watching his marriage collapse. It was not sad. It was not bitter. It was smug. Like someone who had just checked something off his to-do list. He kissed me on the cheek, casually mentioned he was going to stay at a friend's place for a while, and laughed. No fight. No discussion. No attempt to reconcile. Just that smile. I should have asked him then. Demanded to know what was behind it. But instead, I told myself it was over. Maybe it was better this way. But was it? The next morning, I opened the packet. My eyes went straight to the numbers. Because divorce, when you strip away the heartbreak, becomes math. House, he wanted to sell and split. Savings, already accounted for. Car, he wanted his. It all looked too simple. Too neat. Then I reached the section on assets. The line that read disclosed accounts caught my attention. 3 accounts were listed. 3. I knew about the joint checking. I knew about his retirement fund. But the 3rd? A tiny account with only a few $1,000s tucked into a bank ID never even heard of. Why mention a pocket change account, but not the investment portfolio he bragged about for years? Why show the crumbs and hide the cake? Unless, of course, the cake was somewhere he did not want me to see. That night, my best friend Clara came over with takeout and cheap wine. Divorce survival kit, she called it. I slid the papers across the table. Something's wrong. Look at this. She frowned, squinting at the pages. 3 accounts? That's it? Didn't he brag about buying into a startup a couple years ago? Yes. I nearly shouted. He said it would double in 5 years. Where is that? Why is not that here? Clara leaned in, whispering like someone might be listening. Maybe he cashed out and spent it. On what? I snapped. He still drives the same car. He still wears the same cheap suits. He is not flashy. Where would all that money go? Her silence said more than words. Then she looked at me with that knowing stare only a best friend can manage. What if he is hiding it? At first, I laughed. Hiding money? That was something billionaires did, not my oatmeal for breakfast husband. But Clara did not laugh. And slowly, neither did I. 2 days later, I ran into Sandra, an old neighbor, in the grocery store. She was chatting about her grandkids when she casually dropped a sentence that sent chills through me. Oh, I saw Mark last week. He looked so different, pulled up in some gorgeous car. Not the one he usually drives. I thought, wow, retirement must be treating him well. My smile froze. A gorgeous car? Mark had always insisted we could not afford to upgrade ours. He refused to fix the leaking roof because money was tight. And now he was driving something nice enough to make Sandra stop and stare. I excused myself, but inside I was shaking. Was Sandra mistaken? Was it a rental? Or was Mark living a double life while I clipped coupons and stretched leftovers? That night, I stared at the ceiling, the questions pounding like a drum. Why did he smile when he laughed? Why were there only 3 accounts? Why was Sandor so certain about that car? And the biggest question of all, had my entire marriage been a lie? I pulled the divorce papers off the nightstand again. The neatness was not a sign of honesty. It was a magician's trick, neat lines hiding sleight of hand. And for the first time in months, I felt something sharp. Determination. If he thought I had signed quietly, he did not know me anymore. My first meeting with the lawyer was a revelation. He flipped through the documents, frowning deeper with each page. "This does not add up," he said finally. "If he has worked as long as you have said, this is far too little." Vindication surged in me. The lawyer leaned back, steepling his fingers. "It happens more often than you think. Spouses hide assets, offshore accounts, business deals under someone else's name, even safes full of cash. The trick is proving it. Can we?" I asked, my voice shaking but sharp. He hesitated. "It is not easy. But if he is hiding something, he will slip up. They always do. Always." That word clung to me. Mark thought he was clever. But now, I had professionals on my side. The game had shifted. The next day, the house phone rang. A man's voice, low and hurried, asked, "Is Mark there?" "No," I said cautiously. "Who's calling?" Silence. Then a click. Wrong number? Possibly. But why did it sound like someone expecting a deal to go through? Why hang up so abruptly? I stood there, the dial tone buzzing in my ear, my heart thudding. Who was calling my husband at our house, after he had already left me behind? A week later, I opened the mail and froze. An envelope with no return address. Inside, one single slip of paper. A wire transfer receipt. The amount? Hundreds of thousands. The sender? Mark. The receiver? A name I did not recognize. The paper trembled in my hands. This was not paranoia. This was proof. But proof of what? Was he laundering money? Hiding it overseas? Funding another woman? Another life? The question swirled, darker and heavier than ever. And for the first time, a chill ran through me that was not about money. What if exposing him did not just ruin him, but put me in danger? That night, I opened my journal and wrote one line. He thinks I will sign these papers quietly. He thinks I will walk away with nothing. But he doesn't know I have seen the cracks. And I will find the truth. No matter what it costs. Because this wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about the lie. And lies, no matter how carefully buried, always claw their way back to the surface. The night after the court hearing, I sat in my kitchen, the dim yellow bulb above me buzzing as if echoing my frustration. The cheap wine glass I hadn't touched sat sweating on the table, while my lawyer's words looped in my head like a broken record. He swore under oath that this was everything. The accounts we have seen, the house, the car, nothing more. Nothing more. Really? Tell me, does a man who once bragged about hosting CEOs on his yacht suddenly forget to mention where that yacht went? Or how the vacation villa in Italy simply vanished? No. He was lying. And deep down, I could feel it in my bones. But here is the problem with bones. They don't count in court. Judges don't care about instincts. Courts don't run on suspicion. They run on paper. Cold, hard, indisputable proof. So that night, I did what I had been preparing to do without realizing it for years. I went digging. I pulled out every box, every file, every dust-covered folder I had saved during our marriage. Old tax returns he told me to file away. Bank statements he had left lying on the counter. Business contracts he tossed at me like I was his secretary. He thought I wasn't paying attention. But I was. Always. Hours passed. The pile around me grew until my kitchen looked like a crime scene of paperwork. My hands were covered in dust, my eyes burning from scanning numbers. And then there it was. The first clue. A single tax return from 5 years earlier. On 9/21, almost invisible, a small interest payment from a foreign bank I had never heard of. The name, strange, unpronounceable, glowed at me like neon. An offshore account. Why would he have money offshore if everything was as ordinary as he claimed? I sat back, my pulse thundering in my ears. If there was one account, could there be more? The next morning, I marched into my lawyer's office, the page trembling in my grip. She adjusted her glasses, scanned the line once, then twice. Finally, she looked up, her expression sharp. "This," she said, tapping the page with her pen, "is not something men forget about." Her voice was calm, but the weight of those words hit me like gasoline on an open flame. So we began to dig. We subpoenaed banks. We combed through property records. We even hired a forensic accountant, a man with wire-rimmed glasses and a quiet stare, the kind of person who could find a dollar bill lost in a haystack. For weeks, it felt like chasing ghosts. Every time we thought we found something, it slipped through our fingers. Shell companies. Layers of transfers. Accounts under names that weren't his but screamed of his fingerprints. And then one evening, the accountant slid a folder across the table toward me. His face gave nothing away. "You need to see this," he said. Inside were wire transfer records. Hundreds of thousands of dollars funneled into a company registered under his cousin's name. A cousin who couldn't even keep the lights on in his own apartment, let alone run an international business. From there, the pattern unfolded. One company led to another. One account fed the next. A web designed not to hold anything, but to scatter, confuse, and conceal. But webs can be unraveled, strand by strand. And when we tugged hard enough, the whole thing began to tremble. But the money wasn't the worst discovery. The real betrayal was who helped him. As we traced the transfers, a familiar name surfaced, his attorney. The same smug man who had stood beside him in court, swearing up and down that everything was disclosed. We uncovered emails between them, cold, calculated instructions about moving assets discreetly and keeping things off the books. I felt the room tilt beneath me. It wasn't just Mark lying. His whole team was in on it. For years, I thought I was fighting my husband. I hadn't realized I was fighting an empire. Proof on paper isn't always enough. Judges want stories. They want a beginning, middle, and end they can understand. So I started piecing it all together like a jigsaw puzzle. The yacht he claimed was sold, still docked in Monaco, registered under one of those shell companies. The villa in Italy, owned by a family trust that conveniently listed him as the sole beneficiary. The offshore account? Only the tip of an iceberg worth millions. One night, with the documents spread across my dining table like a battlefield, I caught myself laughing. Not out of joy, out of disbelief. How arrogant he had been. He thought he could outsmart me. He thought he could erase me. But in his arrogance, he had left a trail so tangled even he couldn't keep it straight. And that trail was going to lead directly to his downfall. But as satisfying as the money trail was, it left me with a darker question that gnawed at me night after night. If he was willing to go this far to hide wealth, what else had he hidden? Was there another partner? Another woman? Another family entirely? Because once you catch someone in one lie, you start questioning everything. Every memory, every kiss, every promise. Had my entire marriage been nothing but a stage play where I was the fool in the audience? My lawyer warned me, if we push too hard now, he will know we were onto him. And if he knows, he'll bury whatever's left even deeper. So I had to play the role of the clueless wife. I had to smile politely in court. I had to sit quietly while he smirked across the room, his eyes glinting with superiority. Every time we passed in a hallway, he tilted his head, grinned, and all but whispered, "You will never touch me." But little did he know, His arrogance had already handed me the keys to his kingdom. The turning point came not from millions, but from something so small most people wouldn't have noticed it. A signature. On a property deed in the Bahamas, one of the shell companies had slipped up. The signatory was supposed to be a trustee. But the handwriting? Identical to Mark's. It was the crack in the armor. If we could prove he was the real owner, the entire empire would collapse like a house of cards. We had him. Finally, we had him. Or so I thought. Right as we prepared to move forward, something arrived that shook me more than any spreadsheet or bank record ever could. A plain envelope. No return address. Just my name, written in shaky, unfamiliar scrawl. Inside was a single sentence. No greeting. No signature. Just, he is hiding more than money. I read it once. Twice. A third time. No explanation. No details. Just that one chilling message. And for the first time since this war began, my fear shifted. Because maybe this wasn't just about assets. Maybe there were secrets buried far darker than bank accounts. That night, I sat in silence at the dining table, the letter trembling in my hands. If the money was only the beginning, then what was the rest of the story? And more importantly, was I prepared to face it? Because exposing wealth was one thing. Exposing whatever else my ex had buried could cost me far more than money. It could cost me my life. The letter lay flat on my table, its single line echoing louder in my head than any courtroom gavel. He is hiding more than money. I stared at it until the letters blurred into ink stains. Who had written this? A friend? An enemy? A stranger with a guilty conscience? Or, my stomach twisted at the thought, someone from his own circle, someone who wanted me to dig just far enough to put myself directly in the line of fire. Because here is the thing about secrets, the deeper you dig, the darker they get. And this one felt pitch black. For days, I couldn't shake it. I had unfolded the note, smoothed the creases, read the words again, and feel my chest tighten. What more could there be? I already knew about the offshore accounts, the shell companies, the properties tucked under borrowed names. That was shocking enough. But this letter hinted at something heavier. Something beyond greed. And I couldn't walk away. Not now. The truth had a tux in me. The breakthrough came from a place I least expected, Richard. Richard had been there from the beginning, before the money, before the arrogance that turned my husband into a stranger. He was the quiet partner, the man who stood in the background while Mark, the showman, took the credit. When the divorce began, Richard kept his distance, and I didn't blame him. No one wanted to pick sides in a battlefield like ours. But fate has a cruel sense of timing. One gray afternoon, I spotted him at the coffee shop across from the courthouse. He looked thinner, his face drawn, his eyes heavy with sleepless nights. When his gaze met mine, he hesitated, then, almost against his better judgment, walked toward me. "You need to be careful," he said, not even bothering to sit. His voice was low, urgent, as though the walls themselves might be listening. "It's not just about the money anymore." My blood ran cold. "Was it you?" I asked, clutching my cup tighter than I realized. "Did you send the letter?" He shook his head slowly. "No, but I know what it means." Richard leaned in closer, his breath smelling faintly of stale coffee. "Your husband, he wasn't hiding all that money just for himself. Some of it belongs to people you don't want to cross. Dangerous people. People who made him promises. And now they expect him to deliver." The air between us thickened until it was hard to breathe. "Are you saying the money is dirty?" My voice barely rose above a whisper. Richard didn't answer. He didn't have to. The look in his eyes said enough. Then, as quickly as he had appeared, he turned and walked away, leaving me with more questions than I could bear. The words replayed in my head, dangerous people. It made a sick kind of sense. Mark had always been reckless, greedy, so certain he could charm his way through life. Why wouldn't he think he could take money from the wrong hands and come out unscathed? But if Richard was right, then this wasn't just about divorce court anymore. Exposing him wouldn't just embarrass him. It would expose others who might not take kindly to being dragged into the light. And shadows don't like to be exposed. That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling while my lawyer's advice circled in my brain. Stay focused on what the judge needs. Don't chase ghosts. But how could I not? If Richard was right, then my ex wasn't just lying to me. He was playing with fire. And fire doesn't care who it burns. So I did the one thing I swore I would never do. I confronted him. It was after a hearing, in the echoing hallway outside the courtroom. He was laughing with his attorney, the picture of confidence, like a man who believed he had already won. I walked up, steady but shaking inside, and locked eyes with him. Who are you really hiding this money for? I asked, my voice sharp enough to cut through his grin. For a split second, his mask slipped. His smile faltered, his eyes widened, just enough to tell me I had struck the nerve I was aiming for. Then, like a curtain dropping, the mask was back. He leaned close, his cologne sharp, his words sharper. You don't want to know, he whispered. Trust me. And with that, he turned, laughing again as though nothing had happened. But I wasn't fooled. Because that reaction confirmed everything. There was more. The forensic accountant had been digging into another set of transfers, small amounts this time, nothing compared to the millions we had already unearthed. But the names attached were corporations. They were individuals. And some of those names sent chills crawling up my spine. One had a conviction for smuggling. Another was tied to a fraud case that made national headlines. Another, racketeering. This wasn't just hidden wealth. It was laundering. And if the court found out, Mark wasn't just risking money. He was risking prison. The realization cornered me with an impossible choice. Do I keep quiet, focus only on the assets tied to me, and walk away with my rightful share? Or do I risk everything, my safety, my peace, maybe even my life, to expose him for what he truly was? Tell me, what would you do if the man you once promised forever turned out not just to be a liar, but a criminal? I didn't have long to think. One evening, pulling into my driveway, I spotted it. A black SUV parked across the street. Engine running. Windows tinted too dark to see inside. My gut told me it was at random. As I stepped out of my car, the SUV rode forward slowly. The driver lowered the window just an inch, just enough for me to catch the shadow of an unfamiliar face. Then the window slid up, and the SUV drove away. Not fast. Not fleeing. Just watching. A warning. The next morning, I was pacing in my lawyer's office, the color drained from my face. This isn't just about court anymore, I told her. There are people involved who don't want the truth to come out. She frowned, tapping her pen against her desk like a nervous drum. If that's true, then you are in more danger than I realized. We will need to be careful about how we move forward. Careful? That word again. But how do you stay careful when you don't even know which shadows are safe to stand in? I thought I had seen the worst of it. Until another letter arrived. This one wasn't typed. It was handwritten, soppy, rushed, like someone had scrawled it in the dark. The envelope contained only one sentence. If you want to survive this, find the ledger. The ledger. What? Ledger? Where was it? Who wrote this? And most importantly, what was inside that was so dangerous someone risked everything just to warn me about it? All I knew was this: the lies went deeper than I had ever imagined. And if the ledger truly existed, it could be the key to everything. The proof I needed. The danger I feared. Maybe even the weapon that could finally bring him down. Or, the thought gnawed at me, it could be the thing that got me killed. The second letter trembled in my hands. If you want to survive this, find the ledger. The handwriting was shaky, rushed. Whoever had written it wasn't calm, wasn't careful. They were desperate. Maybe even running out of time. But one word refused to leave my mind. Survive. Why would a ledger, a book, a collection of numbers and names determine whether I lived or died? That night, I sat alone in my kitchen, the same yellow bulb buzzing above me like a dying fly, the note spread out on the table in front of me. I stared at it for so long the words began to blur. What could it possibly contain? More accounts? More hidden property? Or something heavier, something that turned money into danger? And then another thought struck me, colder than ice water down my back. If I was being warned to find it, that meant others were searching for it too. What if I wasn't the only one racing toward the so-called ledger? What if the game had already started, and I was running behind? I started with the obvious, his office. My ex had always been obsessive about records. He kept files on everything, insurance, business contracts, even the dry cleaning receipts he never wanted to pay twice for. If a ledger existed, surely it would be tucked away among his important documents. But after hours of rifling through dusty folders, all I found was surface-level neatness. Tax returns, investment reports, real estate files. All polished, all clean. Nothing that screamed danger. Unless he had hidden it somewhere only he knew. Then, 2 days later, during a recess in court, he slipped. He leaned across the table, his cologne sharp, his smirk sharper, and whispered, "Careful, darling. You are digging too deep. Keep it up, and you will end up like the ledger, gone." Gone. The word hit me like a hammer. So it was real. The ledger existed. And he was terrified I might find it. But where? That night, I couldn't stop replaying his words. I needed a lead, and one name kept circling back in my mind, Richard. His old business partner, the one who had already warned me to be careful. If anyone knew about hidden records, it would be him. I called him, insisting we meet. He agreed, reluctantly, at a diner on the far edge of town. When I slid the second letter across the table, Richard's face drained of color. His spoon clattered against the coffee cup. "Where did you get this?" he whispered. "It was left for me," I said. "What does it mean? What's in the ledger?" He didn't answer right away. His eyes darted to the corners of the room, scanning shadows. Then he leaned forward, voice low. "The ledger isn't just about money. It's about people. Names. Every transaction, every deal, every payoff, it's all in there. Judges. Politicians. Even men you have seen smiling on TV. Your husband didn't just steal from you. He built an empire on secrets." My stomach turned to stone. "And you think he keeps it at the house?" I asked. Richard's silence was answer enough. I should have walked away. Taken what I had, secured my share, and let the rest rot in the dark. But something in me snapped. Maybe it was justice. Maybe revenge. Maybe curiosity so sharp it cut through fear. Either way, I made my decision. I would find the ledger. The opportunity came faster than I expected. My ex had a business retreat 2 days out of town. I knew exactly who to call, a locksmith friend who owed me a favor. That night, under the cold glow of the moon, I stayed outside the house I once called home. My hand shook as I slipped the key into the door and stepped inside. Every creak of the floorboards echoed like a gunshot. My heart pounded so loud I was sure the walls could hear it. We searched. The study. The office. The bedroom. Nothing but pristine order and smug reminders of his wealth. Then, in the library, my hand brushed against something odd. A shelf that didn't set flush. I pressed harder. It shifted. Behind it, embedded in the wall, was a steel safe. My pulse quickened. The locksmith got to work. His tools whispered against the lock, each turn of the dial drawing me closer to either salvation or disaster. Finally, with a soft click, the safe swung open. Inside was a single leather-bound book. The ledger. It was heavier than I expected, its cover cracked, its pages thick and crammed with ink. My hands trembled as I opened it, and what I saw made my blood run cold. Not just numbers, not just offshore accounts. Names. Pages and pages of names. Some I recognized immediately. Politicians, CEOs, even a judge from our very courthouse. Others were strangers, but I could sense their weight. Transactions tied to bribes. Payoffs. Illegal deals. Smuggling routes. Quiet kickbacks that explained why certain contracts had always seemed to fall in his lap. And threaded through it all was my ex-husband's name, again and again, signing, approving, collecting. This wasn't just evidence. It was dynamite. Enough to bury him, and maybe half the city, with him. But the thrill of discovery didn't last, because the crunch of tires on gravel froze me in place. Headlights spilled through the window. He was back. Panic surged through me. I shoved the ledger into my bag, motioned for the locksmith to hide. We darted into the shadows just as the front door opened. His voice drifted inside, casual, humming as he tossed his coat aside. He wasn't supposed to be back until tomorrow. Had someone tipped him off? My lungs burned as I held my breath. For a moment, it seemed we might escape unnoticed. Then, footsteps. Heavy. Growing closer. The doorknob turned. And just before the door swung open, the locksmith's phone buzzed in his pocket. Loud. Piercing. We were caught. His eyes found mine instantly. Rage. Triumph. A predator cornering prey. Well, he hissed. Curiosity really does kill, doesn't it? I thought it was over, until the locksmith did something reckless. He stepped forward, voice shaking but steady enough. You don't scare me. I already sent a copy of what we found to someone else. A bluff. I knew it. He knew it. But for one heartbeat, my ex froze. Doubt flickered in his eyes. And in that heartbeat, I ran. I don't remember how I made it out. The night was a blur of pounding footsteps, a slammed door, my car engine roaring to life. All I know is the ledger was pressed to my chest, my knuckles wide around the steering wheel, my breath ragged as if I had sprinted miles. But as adrenaline drained away, one chilling truth settled in my bones. I wasn't safe anymore. I had the ledger. And now, they would come for me. That night, I locked every window, bolted every door, double-checked every shadow in my house. But even with every barrier sealed, the question wouldn't leave me. Was I holding proof? Or was I holding a death sentence? Either way, there was no turning back. The game had changed. And survival was no longer a guarantee. The courthouse loomed like a fortress that morning, its stone facade catching the pale light of dawn. Cold. Unyielding. The kind of place built to intimidate, where truth and lies collided under the shadow of a gavel. I tightened my grip on the manila folder clutched in my hand. Inside it lay the ledger copies and bank statements I had unearthed after months of digging. Proof, I hoped. Proof strong enough to pierce through my ex-husband's carefully constructed lies. But as I stood before those towering doors, a single thought gnawed at me. Was I ready for this battle, or had I just painted a giant target on my back? The moment I stepped inside, the courthouse swallowed me whole. The air smelled faintly of coffee and ink, carrying the low hum of whispered conversations. Lawyers in crisp suits darted across the marble floor, their files stacked like weapons of war. Every detail, from the squeak of polished shoes to the rustle of legal pads, reminded me this wasn't just a hearing. It was combat. And I wasn't supposed to win. At least not in his eyes. My ex was already there. He sat at the defendant's table, his custom-tailored navy suit hugging his frame like armor. His posture screamed competence, leaned back, legs crossed, one hand drumming lazily against polished wood. His smirk caught me from across the room, sharp enough to cut. Beside him, his lawyer, a tall, hawk-faced man with eyes as cold as a winter storm, leaned in and whispered something. My ex chuckled. They looked like predators waiting for prey. And there I was, sitting alone at the petitioner's table, armed with nothing but the truth, and the thin folder I hugged like a lifeline. But would the truth be enough? All rise, the bailiff barked, his voice echoing like a gunshot. We rose as the judge entered, a woman with steel gray hair pulled back in a tight bun. Her black robe swept behind her like a shadow as she ascended to the bench. She carried authority in every step. The kind of authority that silenced a room without a word. Be seated, she said. The opposing lawyer wasted no time. Rising to his feet, he delivered his opening volley with smooth precision. Your Honor, he began, voice measured, this case is nothing more than a vindictive attempt by my client's ex-wife to tarnish his reputation and secure funds she has no claim to. We are prepared to prove that every accusation of hidden assets is baseless. Every word felt like poison dripping into the room. I could feel my ex's eyes on me, taunting me, daring me to falter. Miss Hart, the judge said, turning toward me, you may proceed. My palms slipped with sweat as I rose, the folder shaking faintly in my grasp. My voice cracked on the first syllable but steadied with the second. Your Honor, I said, this is not about vengeance. This is about truth. About a man who used lies to strip me of what I was entitled to. And I have proof that he deliberately concealed his wealth during our divorce proceedings. I placed the folder gently on the bench as though it were a weapon drawn in battle. The next hour unfolded like a chess game. His lawyer glided across the courtroom floor, piece by piece, argument by argument, portraying me as bitter, unstable, clinging to fantasy. He waved around tax documents that gleamed with cleanliness, insisting they told the whole story. But I knew better. When my turn came, I rose again. This time with steel in my spine. These documents, I said, laying out enlarged copies of the ledger entries, are not random numbers. They are a trail. A deliberate, meticulous trail leading to accounts hidden under shell companies, transfers made with surgical precision, and payments sent to entities that do not exist. The judge leaned forward, her sharp eyes narrowing as they scanned the first page. The opposing lawyer pounced, objecting furiously, his words spilling like rapid gunfire, inadmissible, irrelevant, fabricated. But the judge did not strike them down. Not yet. And in that moment of hesitation, I felt it, like the first crack splintering through glass. Then came cross-examination. His lawyer made the mistake of putting my ex on the stand. He thought showcasing his client's charm and composure would dismantle me. But charm has limits. Confidence can curdle into arrogance. Mr. Anderson, I asked, my voice steady now, are you saying under oath that you disclosed every single one of your financial accounts during our divorce proceedings? Yes, he answered smoothly, flashing that smug smile. Every account? Yes. Every transaction? Yes. The air thickened as I tapped the folder. Then, slowly, I lifted the enlarged prints and gestured to the courtroom projector. Then, Mr. Anderson, can you explain these? The screen lit up with bold black. Numbers, transactions snaking their way into a Cayman Islands account. Payments wired to a shell company under his friend's name. A pattern too deliberate to dismiss. His face did not crack. But his eyes betrayed him. For a single second, they darted sideways, like a predator caught in its own snare. Objection? His lawyer roared. But the damage was done. The room buzzed. I could almost hear the whispers. Cayman Islands. Shell companies. Hidden money. The judge's eyes sharpened. Mr. Anderson, she said, her tone like steel dragged across stone, are you prepared to explain these documents? His lawyer tried to shield him, rattling off objections. But the judge was no longer swayed. And for the first time, his perfect composure wavered. His voice cracked as he stammered, those were business transactions, not personal accounts. Business transactions, I countered, with companies that don't exist. The silence that followed was deafening. The judge slammed her gavel. Enough. Her voice carried authority that silenced the buzzing courtroom. This court takes accusations of financial concealment seriously. I will review these documents in detail. Both parties will prepare for further hearings. If it is proven that Mr. Anderson intentionally concealed assets, there will be consequences. The word consequences hung heavy in the air. My ex's jaw tightened, his smirk finally gone. He looked at me then, not with triumph, but with something colder. A promise. "This isn't finished," he muttered as he passed me in the corridor afterward. And maybe he was right. The courthouse emptied, its echoing halls slowly draining of voices and footsteps. I lingered in the marble corridor, my back pressed against the cold wall, the folder still clutched against my chest. I should have felt victorious. I had cracked open his lies, exposed a glimmer of truth. But instead, unease gnawed at me. Because the war wasn't won. The battlefield had only shifted. That night, lying awake, the questions returned like ghosts. Would the judge see the truth as clearly as I did? Or would his army of lawyers twist it back into shadow? Had I just tipped the scales, or had I provoked a desperate man into fighting even dirtier? The gavel had fallen, but its echo whispered the same warning: the reckoning was yet to come. The thing about lies is this: once you tug at one thread, the whole web begins to tremble. But what happens when the spider realizes you were the one pulling? That was the danger I now faced. I had exposed enough in court to put my ex-husband on the defensive. But I knew him too well. He wasn't the type to roll over and admit defeat. No, he was the type to double down, to strike harder, to claw his way out of any corner. The question that haunted me was simple and terrifying. How far would he go to keep his empire of lies intact? The days leading up to the final hearing stretched into sleepless nights that bled into one another. My phone buzzed at midnight with anonymous calls that hung up the moment I answered. Letters with no return address slid under my apartment door. Blank sheets of paper or single words scrawled in black marker: stop. And outside my window? Shadows. Always shadows. Were they lingering too long because of my paranoia, or was someone really watching me? One evening, as I sat staring at a cold cup of tea, an email pinged. No subject line. No signature. Just one sentence: you think you have won? You have no idea what I'm capable of. My hand shook as I read it. Fear rose like bile in my throat. But then something shifted. Because here's what my ex never understood: you can't intimidate someone who's already lost everything. Fear, when you live with it long enough, stops being chains. It becomes fuel. And I was ready to burn every last drop. The night before the final hearing, a knock rattled my door. Sharp? Urgent. I froze. For a heartbeat, I imagined it was him, that he had come to silence me himself. But when I opened the door, the sight left me stunned. It wasn't my ex. It was his sister, Claire. We hadn't spoken in years. She'd taken his side during the divorce, parroting every lie I'd ever told. Her silence had cut as deeply as his cruelty. And yet here she was, her eyes darting nervously down the hall, a slim envelope clutched in her trembling hands. Don't ask me why I'm here, she whispered, her voice frayed. Just take this. You need to see it. Before I could respond, she shoved the envelope into my hands and walked away without another word. Inside, more bank transfers. Millions funneled into an offshore trust in the Bahamas. Fake corporations stacked like dominoes, all leading back to him. Smoke was one thing. But this was fire. Why would Claire betray her own brother now? Was it guilt? Fear? Or had she finally seen the monster he truly was? I didn't know. And in that moment, I didn't care. All I knew was that tomorrow, when I stood in that courtroom, I wouldn't just be hinting at deception. I'd be holding undeniable proof. By morning, the courthouse felt different, charged, almost electric. Reporters packed the benches, their pens poised like daggers, hungry for scandal. When my ex walked in, his chin was high, his smirk polished. But I saw it. The twitch in his jaw. The way his fingers clenched tighter than usual. His mask was slipping. The judge entered, and silence fell like a blade. His lawyer rose first, voice chirping with rehearsed confidence. Your Honor, this entire charade rests on fabricated documents and the bitter imagination of my client's ex-wife. There is no evidence of hidden wealth, only the baseless accusations of a woman desperate for attention. His words slithered through the air, heavy with contempt. He even gestured at me like I was nothing more than a nuisance. And then it was my turn. I rose slowly, each step deliberate. The envelope Claire had given me burned like a brand in my hand. Your Honor, I said, my voice steady now. Since our last hearing, new evidence has come to light. I handed the envelope to the bailiff, who carried it to the bench. The judge pulled out the pages, her eyes scanning with growing intensity. These transfers, I said, gesturing to the enlarged projections on the screen, show funds funneled through shell companies into an offshore trust in the Bahamas. The total exceeds $6 million. Not only does this confirm concealment, it proves intent. The courtroom leaned forward as one, a collective gasp pulsing through the air. My ex shifted in his seat, his skin blanching. And then, the mask cracked. He slammed his fist against the table so hard the wood groaned. This is a setup, he roared. She's lying. Everyone's lying. Mr. Anderson, the judge barked, control yourself. But he didn't. He couldn't. His voice spiraled into something raw, unfiltered. You think you can ruin me? You think you can take what's mine? I built this. You are nothing without me. The room froze. Reporters scribbled furiously. Gasps ricocheted off the walls. This wasn't the polished man in a custom suit anymore. This was the real him unraveling before everyone's eyes. And in that moment, I didn't need to say another word. Because the truth had already spoken louder than I ever could. After a tense recess, the judge returned, her voice calm but unyielding. Based on the evidence presented, this court finds that Mr. Anderson did, in fact, conceal significant assets during divorce proceedings. Accordingly, those assets are to be disclosed and equitably divided. Furthermore, penalties will be applied for perjury and fraudulent concealment. The words fell like stones into water, rippling across the courtroom. Gasps. Murmurs. Stunned silence. It was over. The web of lies he had spent years spinning collapsed in a single sentence. Outside, reporters swarmed. Microphones shoved toward me like weapons. How did you uncover the hidden wealth? Were you afraid to go against him? What happened, Sal? I didn't answer. I just walked past, the autumn air crisp against my face, the weight of the folder still pressed to my chest. Because here's the truth about victories like this. They don't come with champagne or parades. They come with exhaustion, with relief, and with the quiet knowledge that, for once, the lies didn't win. That night, I sat by my window. The city lights twinkled like scattered diamonds across the dark sky. For the first time in years, my chest felt lighter. The fear was gone, replaced by something I hadn't felt in far too long. Peace. I thought of Claire, and the courage it must have taken for her to hand me that envelope. Sometimes justice doesn't come from the people you expect. It comes from those who finally decide enough is enough. And I thought of him. My ex-husband. The man who believed he could bury the truth beneath ledgers and shell companies. But the truth doesn't stay buried. It claws its way back to the surface, no matter how deep you try to hide it. The final reckoning wasn't about money. It wasn't even about punishment. It was about proving one simple, unshakable truth. Even the strongest web of lies will collapse under its own weight. And sometimes, all it takes is one person brave enough to tug the thread. So let me ask you, if you discovered your partner was hiding a secret fortune during your divorce, would you risk everything to expose them, knowing it could put you in danger? Or would you walk away, letting the lie live on? Because sometimes the scariest truth isn't what they hide. It's realizing that justice only comes when you're willing to fight for it.